Welcome to the second episode of the NextWaveDV podcast. I'm Tony Reale.
And I'm Ben Carlson, and I am dressed as the set today.
You are matching the background incredibly well.
I did not do this on purpose, and yet here we are. Thank you. Thank you.
For those of you watching or listening only on our podcast, you can check out the entire video podcast on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/NextWaveDV. But if you're just listening to the sultry sound of our voice, we welcome you. Thanks for coming back.
And ignore what I said. I'm in a very nice, well-fitting suit. That's not a...
That's how I always think of you, Ben.
Oh, you're so sweet. You're so sweet.
All right, what are we going to talk about today?
Let's talk... I think we talked a little bit last time about the origin of Creative Edge and kind of how you started a video production business. But that's not the only business you have.
This is true.
Let's talk about how from a production company, you took the dive and made the practical and very sense-making leap into starting a VR arcade. Seems like a natural one-two progression.
Exactly. You go right from one to the other.
Yeah.
So when we were, virtual reality was something that Sean, those of you that have watched NextWaveDV for a while know Sean is my business partner. And we've been doing virtual reality as a hobby thing for a long time. Some people that are into gaming are very competitive. We have, and that's, I'll get to that too, is our growth of the arcade into competitive gaming. I'm more experiential, I guess is the best word, because I play the campaign more than the multiplayer of a video game.
Yeah.
And I, built a home theater, which you get to enjoy.
That's right. It's very nice. Thank you.
So I love creating the most immersive experience. And of course, virtual reality is like the best of that right now. Yeah. And so when virtual reality was still in its infancy, I had gotten one of the developer kits of the Oculus, and I had played around with it. And we were trying to figure out a way to incorporate it into Creative Edge, because we were like, this is so much the future. This is so cool. We got to figure out a way to do this. And we played around. I purchased a couple of virtual reality cameras, some 360 cameras, some 3D cameras. We played around with different ways of incorporating it, from like trade show video to immersive, interactive, educational content. We had a lot of challenges trying to get our clients to wrap their minds around it. Sometimes it's hard enough to get them to wrap around their mind around regular video, let alone something that requires a headset to put on to get it.
And in a time where virtual reality, I mean, a lot of people didn't know it past the Game Boy and Nintendo version of it.
Exactly. And we were just also coming off of 3D TVs. So there was still that, and even today, still that reputation of like, the 3D TVs aren't that cool. Virtual reality must not be that cool.
Right.
So it was a fun thing for us, and we were trying to find ways to incorporate it into Creative Edge. And we did get a few projects with them, and we still have some clients even today that we do virtual reality content for, but it's not a very big portion of our business. And so as I was kind of watching out of the corner of my eye, I was seeing people start to open up virtual reality arcades in the United States. When they were starting to become more popular over in Asia, and then they were starting to pop up in the US, and I was kind of looking, I'm like, that's not really legal. the way that they were doing it. There wasn't proper licensing for the games. So people were just logging into their Steam accounts and then letting people play it and charging them for it. And so at first I was like, that's a bad idea. And then eventually, like, as a lot of businesses develop, is like, okay, we got to come up with a way to do this correctly. So Steam started creating proper licensing, and then there were other back-end softwares that started being developed. So I started saying, oh, there is a legal way to do this. And the more I thought about it, the more I talked to the guys, and I'm like, it would be kind of cool to, I felt like at some point in time in our market, we're in Green Bay, Wisconsin. There's about 250,000 people in our general area. It's a decent sized town, not huge, not tiny, just about the right size for a place to warrant something like a virtual reality arcade. But I don't think this area could handle more than one. Yeah. So I was like, if either we were going to open it or somebody else was. And so I talked to the guys about it. We discussed it. And it was just kind of like a little bit of a dream. Back in, I think it was July of 2017, I started throwing around this idea. So VR had been out for a little bit over a year. Like consumer VR came in like March of 2016. And so it'd been just over a year of just playing around with this. And we talked about it. We started looking at like areas in downtown Green Bay, and the rental was extremely high, and I was hesitant because I didn't know how the market would receive it. So I wanted to try and hedge our expenses, try and keep things manageable. And when I was starting the arcade, I kind of really created a really simple outline of how to keep our expenses in control. And it was basically, what's the maximum potential revenue that our arcade could have? So if every station was being rented over the course of the time, and let's assume that half of the stations are being rented at half the capacity. So that would basically be a quarter potential capacity. So my goal was to keep all of our revenue or all of our costs below the quarter capacity of the arcade. And that's frankly what kept us going through COVID. If it wasn't for that, we would have probably had to shut down. There were a lot of places in this area that got shut down during that time.
Was that an arbitrary number? How did you come up to quarter or half?
That was just my target. I know some places that operate at well beyond that. Like a lot of restaurants operate at like 80% of their potential revenue, and they have to get it during their peak times of, like weekends and evenings and stuff like that. I was just, again, very, very hesitant to push too far into, having a too expensive of a thing, especially when we hadn't done something like this before. We were, Creative Edge Productions was a high ticket, low volume, and B2B. So now we switched to low ticket, high volume B2C, like the most flipping of a thing that
inverse
you can do.
Everything. Right. Absolutely. And
so when we talked about it, I started looking around. Rental was a lot higher than I wanted it to be. And so then I just talked to the guys, and like the front of the place that we had been renting for our studio actually had a nice store frontage. We just never really used it for that. We used it as our offices. And I said, you know what, we could just kind of rearrange the layout of Creative Edge and just take the front suite and turn that into the first version of the arcade and just see what happens.
Yeah.
It was going to be a lot cheaper for us. And there was no long-term commitments, other leases we had to do. And the other thing about it too is just, it's right here. I don't have to go across town to go check in the arcade. I just pop out of my office and I'm already there.
Sure.
So, in September of 2017, we started moving forward. We came up with the name Edge VR Arcade, bought the domain, started going through all that. One of the reasons we chose the name Edge was because Creative Edge Productions was here. And at the time, that was the bigger company.
Yeah. Right.
So we were like, let's just, instead of making it confusing for our customers, let's just keep Edge as the dominant brand.
Sure.
So Edge VR Arcade became the name. And we even chose VR Arcade. Like I saw other VR arcades that were moving away from the arcade name. They were trying to be really cerebral, and they, the Edge Experience or the whatever. They tried to come up with this really elaborate name, and I was like, "Why? You guys are losing out on your best potential in the name. The name of arcade is something that is searched for on Google."
Absolutely.
So we incorporated the name into the brand of arcade, because even though a VR arcade is not a traditional arcade, it's not a coin op. It's still different than what most people are used to. It was still something that we realized that's still something that's searched for on Google. Yeah. And so inherent to the name, we still have people that come here and go, okay, so what kind of arcade are you guys? Do you have coin ops?
Yeah.
And so anyways, that in branding, we realized that even though it was still different than what it was, it still helped us to keep that name going forward.
I would have to imagine too, lots of people could have video games at home. Lots of people, and especially now, lots of people are getting VR headsets at home. There is something to going to an arcade. There is that long past of gaming where that's what you did. You would go to the mall. I remember even back when the mall here had the arcade, and you go in, you bring your quarters, and that's, parents went shopping and you got to play. So having an actual place to have an arcade, I think, is an important distinguisher for why this is a destination to come to.
Well, and you brought up a good point, which is like, for us, when we were creating the model of the arcade, it needed to be somewhere that we ourselves want to go to. And we are early adopters. We have a lot of this stuff at home. So it needs to be cool enough for us. And that was our test. If we could make it cool enough that we wanted to go to it, then chances are our customers would enjoy it too.
Yeah.
And so a big portion of that was, I wanted this, I know that we never had the budget to go full bore into like the high end build out of just over the top cool stuff. So we had to work with what we had, and we as owners put in all the elbow grease of the painting and the drywalling and the build outs and the redesigns and coming up with things to look cool. Like I did these hexagons on the wall that we cut out by hand out of this thin board material, and then I had to prime them and paint them, and it took me weeks and weeks to do them, and then I put them up with double-sided like sticky tape, and the sticky tape wasn't adhesive enough, so they started falling off the walls, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, never gonna do this again. So when we started doing the other suites as we expanded later on, like, I'm not doing that. We're gonna do something else. We'll just do like LED lights and stuff like that. But so when we were coming up with that model early on, what was important to me again was we wanted the place to look as cool as we could. You know, our goal was, we said we wanted to be as close to the Disneyland of Green Bay as possible, that's very lofty and ambitious.
No kidding.
But when that was the target, it rose us above. Like, oh, we could this would be fine. People would be fine with that. I looked at a lot of VR arcades, and they would just have like a black sheet up to divide the areas, and they would have the most simple painting on the walls or whatever like that. It was the most basic, because they're like, well, the people, when they're in VR, they don't see anything, so who cares?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that doesn't matter. The people that are paying for it typically are the parents that are putting their kids in. And I want the parents to look at it and go, oh, this is a cool looking place.
This is what I'm paying for.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely.
And that shift and that perspective, I think, really, really helped us long term, because we managed to make the place cool to come into, cool to look at. And then the other side of it, you know, again, the main thing, why would I come to an arcade if I have VR at home? And the number one reason that we reasoned is basically, you might have one VR headset at home, you probably don't have 2 or 3 or 4.
Sure.
So, and even if you do you have the space to do 2 or 3 or 4? Like we sectioned off our booths to be 10 foot by 10 foot, which gives you a lot of room to move around. Some arcades try to cram them tighter so that they could fit more into, you know, a lower amount of space. So you sometimes get, you know, some arcades that are 8 by 8, or even I've seen them as small as 6 by 6. And
wow.
Yeah, it's people bump into each other.
Yeah. Especially when you're trying to build a premium experience, something that you can't do at home.
Yep.
I can squeeze off a corner of a bedroom. I can't give up an entire room, let alone, like you said, 2, 3, 4 rooms just to play some VR.
So when we were setting up our pricing model, one of the things that I want to do early on was discount multiplayer. We called it our multiplayer bundle. So when you book 2 people, you get a little bit of a discount rather than just buying one station.
Yeah.
And we pushed that. We pushed the multiplayer experiences. We focused on getting as many multiplayer games as we could, because that, again, was the draw. Like, yes, you might have VR at home. I know a lot of people that have VR at home that still love to come here because they can just hop in very easily, you know, trying to create that lowest barrier of entry. You hop in, you put the headset on, the library of games are there. You can start playing with your friends as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And those create the memories. I know so many people that are like, I got to shoot zombies with my buddies and I saw them in there and it was so cool.
Yeah.
That's another level above just playing VR by yourself.
Sure.
So yeah, we in March of 2018, we, you know, after lots of work and everything like that, we opened our doors, had a flood of people coming in. It was very well received. But the interesting thing is, before we opened the arcade, like we're in the building that we're at right now, there's 6 suites. We had been renting 2 when we first moved in. We took over the 3rd one, which is the one that we're in right now. So we had 3 of the 6 when we opened the arcade. And we even kind of joked like, oh, it'd be nice if we could take over there's 2 in the front that have the most retail facing forward. Oh, it'd be nice if we could take over that suite. But that store, there was a hockey store there. I'd been there for a while. I'm like, they're not going anywhere. So I don't even feel like asking our landlord. Let's just, and it would have increased our rental, of course. So like, let's just focus on doing what we're doing here. And then about a month before we opened, our landlord came and said, hey, so the hockey store is leaving. Oh, no. Are you guys interested in the suite? And I'm like, yes, but we haven't even opened the arcade yet. I have no idea how it's going to do. He's like, well, we're going to start showing it, so we need an answer. I'm like,
so what'd you do?
Well, we prayed about it and we talked about it a lot, and we felt like, because the other thing about it was, in the suite that we're in right now, there's also before that was a hockey store, it was an Italian restaurant, and they had the leftovers of the restaurant kitchen that was attached to this. They had like kind of cut a hole in the wall, and then that was their doorway into that. Okay. But when we took over this suite, we already got the restaurant kitchen with it. We used that for our tabletop shoots when we did like a lot of cooking shoots in here. Yeah. But we had a restaurant kitchen, but we had no way of getting to the arcade without crossing through Creative Edge's studio.
Sure.
So by taking over that front suite, we thought, well, we could open up a restaurant. We could add a restaurant. And of course, we decided pizza is that's a good option.
Sure.
And so we ended up doing that. So that allowed, it was kind of a double thing. It gave us more space. It allowed us to expand, add more VR stations, but it also allowed us to add a restaurant and when we're focusing on events and birthday parties and all those types of things, it's definitely something that we wanted to be able to have. Food is an option.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just synonymous with it. Birthday parties, pizza, video games. It was a great combination. Yeah. So that was the decisive thing. It allowed us to add that to the arcade, and we ended up using then one of our clients is a company called Ovention for Creative Edge.
Shout out Ovention.
Ovention, yeah. Yep. They make great ovens for restaurants and for C-stores, and they just really quick. I mean, we have our pizzas. We have the great pizzas that we get from our vendor. And they come frozen, but they're very thick. I wanted like good quality pizza. Right. I didn't want like cheap bar food.
There's a time and place for bar pizza, and this is not what we wanted. Going for Disneyland is not what we wanted.
Right. We wanted people to like look forward to the pizza, not go. Like when you go to Chuck E. Cheese and you're like, I guess I'll have a pizza.
Right. I'm not going to say no to pizza.
Right. And so we were like, let's have something that people actually look forward to. So we found a good pizza vendor. We liked the product. But, in order to keep them and have them last as long, we cook them from frozen. The Ovention oven allowed us to cook them in like 7 minutes, like a thick pizza from frozen in 7 minutes. Yeah. And so that otherwise, like, you cook a pizza like that, it takes 20 to 30 minutes to cook it, in a regular oven. So that, so we already had that experience. We were able to get a good product. So it was easy for our staff to use. This is turning into a commercial for Ovention, but anyway, so that made it easier for us. Like by having that, we could make it like we were licensed as a prepackaged restaurant, so we didn't even have to like do a full kitchen.
Yeah.
It was just we had this oven. They were able to cook the pizzas. We expanded the menu down the road to have a few more options like cheese curds.
Because we're in Wisconsin,
of course.
We have to.
For those of you that don't know what cheese curd is, it's delicious and you should try it.
Squeaky cheese,
and then it's fried and so that's
delicious. Dipped in ranch. Oh, come on now.
All right. We got to wrap up on this so we can go eat.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Anyways. So, yeah, we added the restaurant in. We added more VR stations. Again, we slowly started growing the brand. And, things were going pretty solid. And we decided, hey, so one of the question marks that we have, and we've still had to this day, is how long will this model last?
Yeah.
So we initially had a 5-year plan. We figured at least the arcade should be able to exist for 5 years. And work in the current model that it was, because we don't know. It's like I look at it like the GPS. You couldn't predict back in the 90s or early 2000s necessarily that cell phones would dominate and kind of make the GPS market. Now I know that GPSs still exist for like truckers and stuff like that. But when's the last time you bought a GPS?
Never.
Yeah, I bought one like early 2000s and I used it, loved it. And then when my cell phone started having it, I'm like, I'm good.
You're right.
Yeah, I don't, and I don't have to update the software or any of that kind of stuff. Like, so it's one of those things where, that market, if you would rewound back and been like, okay, of course, everybody's going to have GPSs in their cars. Like that, it should be this ever expanding market. And then now we're at like, no, it's just built into our phone.
And even there was the migration from GPS to like a paid specialty feature, VZ Navigate. I remember when that came out, it was like $10 just to use it for the month. And I would have to be super lost in order, like MapQuest would have had to fail me miserably to spend $10 on my little flip phone that I could do VZ Navigator. And that was such a novel thing. And then we're giving it away for free.
Yeah.
What? So I mean, where do you see VR heading in that, because I guess there's no really way to tell, but what do you see?
Like I look at it like right now, VR is great. But I feel like it's in the 80s version of cell phones
sure.
where like cell phones in the 80s made phone calls and they were handy to have. And when I need to contact somebody, I mean, I didn't have one in the 80s, but my parents and, like if you saw like executives that had one or whatever like that, it's a cell phone. And if you need to talk to somebody, not wait till you get home, it's great. But to fast forward 20, 30 years and to say, at this point, you're going to be able to consume all of the internet, all of the, you're going to take pictures and post them into social media, like all these things that we didn't even think of that would exist.
Your business will be run entirely on, entire industries will be run entirely on your cell phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to rewind that back and to say like what a cell phone was in the 80s would evolve into the massive amount of consumer consumption that we have. It would have been almost impossible to think of it that way. And I feel like that's where we're at with VR. Like we're just, like you pop it on and the screen resolution's okay now, and the games are fairly immersive. The graphics are decent. Like, we're at a place of understanding the potential purpose to it.
Sure.
But fast forward 20, 30 years, I think augmented reality is going to continue to grow, and we're going to see, people that you throw on like a pair of glasses as simple as like a pair of Ray-Bans, and we're sitting next to each other, and I'm like, hey, let me show you some pictures from my vacation. And I just tap on the screen and it blips up in a hologram in front of us, and you're seeing it because we have there's a mode in the where it just can instantly share information. Sure. And so we're just sitting over dinner and I'm showing you vacation pictures and just swiping.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's going to be such a common thing, which sounds crazy.
Sure.
But it also would have sounded crazy that I could watch the Super Bowl on a cell phone in the 80s. Like that's ridiculous. So that's where I see the potentially going. I don't know when we're going to get there. And I don't know when mass adoption is going to happen. So we're not there yet. But I also am looking out there and saying that may come sooner than later.
Sure.
And so I don't want to be so wrapped up in a model that has the potential to completely die out. There are evolutions in VR, like a free roam and other things that we can potentially evolve into. But as we've been doing that, when we started the arcade, we incubated within Creative Edge Productions. And then as we evolve the arcade, the second thing that we've moved into is Edge Gamers Lounge, which is our esports center that we've added onto it. And so we've been incubating that within the VR arcade. And that's taken a lot longer to grow because that's more about developing a community than just being open and being a place. Like the arcade is family entertainment. Yeah. And the esports is about community competition.
Yeah.
Totally different. And that's one thing too for us was when we opened the VR arcade, it's a location-based family entertainment venue. Our main demographic are, younger teenagers typically that can come and have fun in some place that they can look forward to once they get too old for Chuck E. Cheese. We're also a great place for young adult date nights. And we've had all the way up to senior citizens that come here and have a good old time.
My uncle, who is now, 69, 70, still to this day talks about doing the Blue experience. It was one of the most incredible things that he said he's seen in his lifetime.
For those of you who haven't seen the Blue, it's a great like underwater experience where you get to see like giant whales and jellyfish and all sorts of really cool stuff.
For him, he had vertigo. Vertigo. So he got motion sick really easy, but we said, just stand still and enjoy. And so he stood on the bottom of the ocean floor on a shipwreck and watched a whale, go by and stare into the eye. And he was absolutely floored. Absolutely floored.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing we're always trying to tell people is like, you don't have to be a gamer to like VR.
Yeah.
My stepdad, who would never ever want to play Call of Duty or any of that kind of stuff, I threw him in a game called Raw Data, which is like a sci-fi shooter.
Yeah. And
he was in there for hours and I was crawling all over the floor, shooting at robots and stuff like that.
It is the best VR game for those that are wondering.
But I'd never seen him do anything like that before. And so, but it was natural for him because he didn't have to memorize how to move the joysticks and everything like that. He just is pointing and pulling a trigger. Yeah. I mean, everybody knows how to do that.
Yeah.
Probably more so in the US than any other country. But,
all right. Okay.
Anyways, so the esports was a way for us to grow our to a new demographic without cannibalizing our existing demographic. And so we were able to add on to that. And, we've been slowly growing that. The thing about esports though, that's different than like almost any other type of sport is that like if you go to a bowling alley, which is probably the best way of thinking of what we do is like we have where you can open rent our computers during a period of time. And then we have tournaments and leagues and stuff like that. Very similar to a bowling alley. But in a bowling alley, they do one game called bowling. And here we have multiple games and we have multiple leagues and we have multiple communities that we're developing. And so they each require their own attention. They each require their own logistics, their own way to manage. Like Rocket League is very different than like Overwatch or any of these types of games. So in order for that to work correctly, it requires extra attention. Like we need a TO or a tournament organizer that's focused on each specific game. And that's the challenge, but it's also the thing to look forward to. Like we can have, like if you like Rocket League, but you care less about, Halo Infinite or something like that, great. we'll have Halo tournaments, and then, you know, like Fortnite we'll have for younger kids, and then we'll have Valorant for older. So like there's different games that we can focus on for different communities, and that allows us to continue to grow and expand that. Thing about it was, though, like we were getting ready to open the esports, and then something happened in 2020. We had
what happened?
We had like a
birthday.
Yeah, something. A lot of people were coughing.
Oh, man.
So, you know, we were on pace to have our best year.
Yeah.
And then we had the shutdown. And for arcades, little tip, if you ever want to open a location-based entertainment venue, typically March is your Christmas for most locations. And the reason for that is combination of, especially if you're in you know, a temperate climate like we are, you got the holidays, November, December, it's holidays. So I mean, we do see an uptick as winter starts to kick in.
Yeah.
But when you start transitioning into January and February, and then people are like, why do we still live in this really cold area?
Why do I live where the air hurts my face?
Exactly. And then by the time you get to March, there's spring breaks and stuff like that. So it's kind of a culmination of like cabin fever and spring break coming to be the busiest month typically of the year for us. So guess when the shutdown happened?
Oh yeah, I remember vaguely.
So yeah, in March 2020, we missed out on our Christmas, and then we had to shut down for 3 months, and you know, time kept ticking away. And fortunately, we were able to stay open, and we were able to reopen, and then we didn't have to, you know, we were worried during that time of, was there going to be any additional shutdowns?
Sure.
We didn't know if we were going to be able to survive that. So we were able to stay alive, stay ticking, and then started growing the esports, but it slowed way the heck down. We didn't really get the momentum until really this year. You know, it took us much longer than we hoped for, but it's also that snowball effect that it's getting bigger and bigger, and so we're developing a better and better reputation, and we're getting a bigger community.
Sure.
We got the right people in place. You know, like I've said before, I'm more of an experiential gamer. I'm not as hardcore of an esport. I like certain games that are competitive, but I'm not one that would typically play in those leagues or tournaments.
Sure.
So we have our manager and our organizers that are much more versed in that.
Yeah.
And we got the right people in place that are helping foster and grow those communities.
Yeah. Now you bring up an interesting point I just want to touch on quick. We have a video game arcade, a virtual reality where you can play games, but then we're talking a lot about esports. And can you talk a little bit, like, what's the difference and why is that such an important distinguishing factor when we are trying to build this out and when we are trying to develop a business plan around it, and what do we need to accomplish this versus just, put in some video games?
Well, you know, obviously it's the difference between, you know, playing a game casually and playing a game competitively. Like you can do anything. You and I can go in the field and go grab a football and just toss it back and forth.
Sure.
That doesn't mean we're going to go play in the NFL. And for a lot of people, the thought of playing in any sort of competitive thing is kind of far-fetched. Maybe there's a volleyball league, maybe there's a softball league, whatever like that. But those are typically kind of disparate. Like unless you're in school or something like that, there isn't something for the young adults to be a part of. And the other side of it too is that you can practice, you can play at home, you can play with your friends and stuff. So, but the thing about it is there's still that experience, that excitement of playing together, coming together. That's, again, going back to what we did for the arcade, and then what we're doing for the esports is to say, you know, we want to make sure that people are having fun together. We're creating a place for people to come to as a community. You know, I often say, like, there's other places in the area. There's axe throwing places and paintball places, all sorts of, you know, arcade places in the area that you could go and have fun. I don't consider them competition. I consider the couch at home competition.
Ooh, that's tough. That's tough competition.
And the challenge, of course, was we were trying to get people used to, especially in the Green Bay market, where there aren't as many things to do. People get very used to being homebodies and just staying at home. Like, come out and do stuff. And then COVID happened. And then you got the government and everybody saying, stay home.
Yeah.
Be a good citizen and stay home.
Yeah.
And so it's taken a long time. And even to this day, we haven't hit the pre-COVID numbers, because I think it's really shifted people's perspective so dramatically that even if they're comfortable going out, they just got into a rhythm of staying home.
Sure.
So again, like, the arcade is typically very dominant during birthday parties, so that's a regular thing.
Yeah.
But just getting into that rhythm of going out and do something. Like, some people, you know, they were excited when they could finally get out of the shutdown. But even so, there are people that just kind of got back into that rhythm of just staying home.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that are still apprehensive about going out into large groups. And so, I mean, that's completely understandable, especially in the world that we've lived through for the past 2 years. I think any level of apprehension is definitely understood. But I do wonder, as people have been home and have you seen an increase in the players that have gotten into video games that maybe they hadn't had an interest, but now they are? And how are they finding these communities?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm not as boots on the ground with the esport community because we've got our managers that take care of that. But I can definitely see that there have been a lot of new people that have come into it and discovered it and, discovered gaming as a whole because of that shutdown. We know that there was the graphic card shortage that happened. Part of it was because of crypto mining, but even a bigger part of it was just people were at home and they were looking for something to do, and gaming was a chance for them to get into it and discover it even better and be able to, discover all these games that are competitive, that can be played competitive. I mean, all the way down to like, Fall Guys or something like that. Like even the most cute games have a competitive, like that's a battle royale game at its core. It's totally different. It's not shooting somebody. It's just flopping around like a goofball, but and still can get that feeling of like, I want to keep going. I'm going to do better next time and see how long I can survive.
Like you would with a sport.
Exactly.
Keep practicing. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so we opened the arcade. We released a video on YouTube that I think has gotten over 70,000 views for how we opened that. And so because of that, I got a lot of people that were reaching out to us and saying, hey, how do I open up an arcade or whatever like that. And, so we did help some people. We had some consulting services that we were doing just to get them up and running and understand what it was. But I remember one time we had a guy call us up and he had opened an arcade. I don't remember where it was in the country. It was in the US, but he was like, I'm really struggling and trying to figure out how to get this going. Could you give me some feedback? I'm like, sure, I'm happy to. So I started asking him questions and, I said like, so, what kind of marketing are you doing right now? And he said, well, he didn't have a website yet.
Oh gosh. Oh no.
He didn't have a Facebook page. He didn't have, he was advertising on the rail systems. So like he would have, those little banner ads, that's where he spent all his advertising money. And Google ads. So those two. And again, but he wasn't even like sending them in the Google ads. He wasn't sending them anywhere to like dynamic. It was or interesting. He had no social media presence. And then as I'm talking to him more, I said like, so, what kind of competition do you have in the others? Oh, there's two other VR arcades that are also in the town. And it was a similar town size to ours, maybe 200,000-300,000. Yeah. And I'm just like, you want my advice? You shouldn't have opened.
No.
I felt bad, but it's just like, that business model, I planned out those things well ahead of time. What's our competition?
Yeah.
Will this area be able to handle it?
Sure.
Is there anybody else considering opening up a VR arcade right now? I remember when we opened our doors and we started putting out the name for it, I saw several people that commented and they're like, hey, they would tag somebody, looks like somebody opened a VR arcade. And then I would see cussing underneath it. So maybe they were considering doing it. But, sometimes a pipe dream is a pipe dream. But so that guy was just like, I felt bad, but it's the truth. Like, he hadn't done enough market research and then he was doing almost everything wrong. I mean, I'm not saying you can't use Google ads correctly, but the way that he was doing, he was not directing them to a site that I could actually turn them into a customer. He had a horrible sales funnel system. He had where he was advertising was, again, on the rail system. That was it. And again, I'm not saying that that's not a potentially good area for advertising, but to say that's your only area for advertising.
That's tough. Yeah. It's a lot of chickens in a small basket.
Yeah, and he had no way of retaining people. Again, no social media, no decent website. It was just very, and it made me realize like how this is why I felt that we were probably one of the best people to do it because we were able to build the brand from scratch. And fundamentally, I mean, in as much as I've enjoyed the arcade and it's been very successful, it was also an experiment for us. It was a chance for us to say, hey, we teach customers all the time how to properly market their businesses. let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's try it ourselves and learn things from it so that we can be better at marketing for other companies. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that I've learned since having an arcade that we have incorporated into our own video productions, into our own marketing training for other customers. And it's been a great asset for us to learn from.
So if you could give someone that's listening, that's watching, if you had said, here's my one or two like golden nuggets of takeaways that I have from years of developing this business, what would you tell them?
I mean, if it's specifically a location-based entertainment venue, then I would say make sure that if you're considering opening it, make sure that you understand the competition in your area and do something that's either better or different than what they're doing, not the same.
Yeah.
And make sure that you can do a great job of marketing your business, whatever, either doing it yourself or working with a company. Do a good job. Have a really solid social media presence. Have good content. Have a good brand. Like, we've had so many people that have come to us over the years and said, so how many other locations do you have? They're like, well, this is the only one. They swore that we were a franchise because our marketing material and our brand presence was so strong compared to any other small little local business. Yeah. And so for them, they were just shocked that we were doing this all by ourselves. Yeah. So again, marketing, of course, make sure that you're doing a great job of building a brand and building your marketing. Edge across the board, Edge VR Arcade, Edge Gamers Lounge, Edge as a place is a name that is starting to roll off the tongue of most people in Green Bay. We still have a lot that still don't know about us. So there's always a great potential to grow from, but that's what we want. We want that community. We want people to care about us. And then, managing your expenses. We had one guy that came to travel almost halfway across the country to visit us because we were the top ranked VR arcade in the region. And so he was curious to see what we had to say. And so he came and he was telling us about, he was going to be doing like a $500,000 build out. And he was expecting food and beverage to be like way the heck higher than we'd average. And just again, his model, his expenses were going to be, his monthly expenses were going to be about 3/4 of his potential revenue. Wow. Dude, that's rough. That's a rough thing to go. I'm not saying you couldn't do it. I'm sure if we moved our arcade to a more densely trafficked area, we would definitely have more traffic to the arcade, but our expenses would quadruple. Right. So I would rather, especially during the slow months, like when we had the shutdown and stuff like that, there's a reason we stayed open. It was because we were able to really tighten up our expenses. And if it wasn't for that, if we had to keep paying rent on this extremely expensive spot and got zero revenue during that time, we probably would have had to shut down. Yeah. Yeah. So managing those would be the three things. There's so much more to it than that. Getting good people in place. One thing that we told our staff, there's a place called Bay Beach, which is like an amusement park. They've got, fair ride type stuff. It's a great place. Yeah. Very inexpensive and kind of a staple of Green Bay. And we bring our kids there all the time. And so it's a ton of fun, but you can tell that the staff that work there are very much like, give me your ticket. And then they put their foot on the thing and then they just wait for the ride to be done. And then you get off and that's fine. That's what you expect. Yeah. But I told our attendants, I'm like, that's not what I want from you guys. I want our customers to feel like, to have an experience. Because when our customers walk through the front door, I know, like, let's say you're one of our attendants. Yeah. For you, this is another day. Right. You've been here for however many days that you've worked here, however many years you've worked here. But for that customer, especially if it's their first time coming in, that's a thing they've been looking forward to. Yeah. That's something they're excited for. Yeah. This could be their birthday party. It could be whatever like that. For them, they're walking through the front doors of Disney World in a manner of speaking. Yeah. And so I want every time a customer to walk in that we're treating them with that same respect and that fun experience. So I told our staff, I think of yourselves more as a bartender than as an attendant. Yeah. Develop rapport, have fun with the customers, have a good personality. Our manager sometimes even pushes it a little further than some customers appreciate, but he also has developed a fun reputation that people enjoy because of that. Yeah. And so I think that became a big part of it. All of the 5-star reviews that we have are almost all of them mention friendly staff as a big factor in that. And that's the only thing that we can do to compete against something like a Chuck E. Cheese or a Dave & Buster's or something like that. We need to have a personality, have a local
Mm-hmm.
brand that people can enjoy and appreciate.
And I think you hit it on the head, not just for location-based venues, but for any business, do it different, do it better. And I think that's when you hold that paramount to what you're building, and that's the bar that you're setting. Like you said, we're going to set it for Disney World. May not hit it, but if that's where you're never gonna underachieve or overachieve greatness.
Yep. All right. Well, that was fun talking about the arcade. I'm sure we'll circle back around. There'll be more stories to tell, but we're going to move on to our new segment called the Pop Culture Corner.
Tony.
Yes.
I got a doozy for you.
Okay.
I know we want to talk a little bit about something different, but I think you're going to be very excited. I just started 12 Monkeys.
All right. Nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
How far are you in?
I was only able to, I just started two nights ago. So I watched the first episode. Not what I was expecting. What was the game that we were just talking about? This war is my war, my world, my war.
This War of Mine.
This War of Mine. It had that that kind of similar feel where you have kind of this post-apocalyptic, you do what you can to survive. And what is right and wrong gets blurred very quickly depending on what side of the aisle you're looking, or not what side of the aisle is not political, but like what side of the situation you're on. And so, I'm very interested.
When your goal is to save the entire world, like you can do some rough stuff to get there.
Yeah. And also you're willing to endure much more when you have an end sight of what the cost is. So it was a very great, Tony has been recommending 12 Monkeys for a long time.
So for those of you that have watched our show content for a while, probably know that I'm a fairly big Star Trek fan.
Oh, you don't say.
Yeah. Chateau Picard. But the showrunner for season 3 of Star Trek Picard, season 1 and 2 have been, some people hate them, some people like them. I enjoy some of the stuff that they did in it. But season 3 is by new showrunner. His name's Terry Matalas. And I've been watching some of the behind the scenes and listening to some the content that's been coming out. And I'm really excited. This guy seems to be a hardcore Star Trek fan.
Nice.
And I'm really eager to see what he's going to be bringing. So in an interview, I heard that he was the creator and showrunner on 12 Monkeys, and a lot of people were raving about it. I'm like, okay. So I checked into it, 4 seasons, about 10, 12 episodes each. I'm like, that's a bite-sized show that I can binge,
Yeah.
And I got into it, and I got sucked in. It was really, really good. And I highly recommend it if you've not seen I know there's a movie, I haven't actually gotten around to seeing that, but the
12
show.
Monkeys movie?
Yeah. It was done in the 90s, had Bruce Willis in it. So I'll probably get around to watching that at some point.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
Show's great. And it's one of those shows, one of the most important things to me is that a show, movie, whatever it might be, sticks the landing. Force Awakens opened up a lot of possibilities and then it fell on its face.
Sure.
Like it just did not stick the landing. And 12 Monkeys did a great job of sticking the landing in my like it's one of those things that starts with a really big premise. And then about after a season or two, you're like, the premise goes bigger. And you're like, I don't know how you can get bigger than trying to save 7 billion people, but it gets bigger.
Yeah.
And so again, like, how do you stick the landing? And I thought they did a really good job.
Nice. I'm excited. Yeah. It's been great so far.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to just talk anytime, by the way, when we talk this, we're going to be spoiler free, like anything we talk about. But Rings of Power is fresh on my brain.
Yes, that's another one.
How far are you into it?
I got 4-5 episodes in now.
Okay.
Yeah.
We finished it, the first season. And, so the thing that I told a lot of people that stood out to me, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I like Star Trek, but my number one favorite trilogy is Lord of the Rings trilogy, followed by the Star Trek Genesis trilogy.
Okay.
But Lord of the Rings, love it. But I'm not a huge, I've read parts of the books, but I've never got through them all. I like the Peter Jackson films. That's the thing about Lord of the Rings that I enjoy. So knowing that Rings of Power was going to be developed by different people and, different studio and different everything, I was wondering how much of that were they going to pull in, how much of it was going to be similar in tone and aesthetic, because it's everything that goes into it. You've got the cinematographer that has his lighting style and his lensing choices. You've got the art direction. You've got Howard Shore, the composer, his musical style. No
kidding.
There's a lot that makes what The Lord of the Rings what it is.
Yeah.
And so you can be in the same universe, but tonally be completely different.
Yeah.
And so I think they did a great job of matching the tone well. It was very obvious that they knew that the fan base of Lord of the Rings, like the Lord of the Rings movies, and that the show needed to be in that color palette, that style.
Yeah.
So they did a good job with that. The thing that stood out to me, the biggest negative that I can say about the show is just really it felt like a show.
Yeah.
As watching the first few episodes, especially, I joked like it almost felt like you could take the core elements of the show and rip off the facade of Middle Earth and put on like Chicago PD cop drama, and almost every beat would land.
Sure.
You've got like, the lady hero that's being kind of pushed down by her boss, and and she gets a promotion, but she doesn't really want it, and she gets like all these things that are happening. It felt like a modern show, and even like the pacing of it, where it had the end of episode teaser and the numerous plot threads. Like if you think of like the Fellowship of the Ring, I know in like Two Towers and in Return of the King they had multiple plot threads going on, but Fellowship really had like one or two going on through the entire movie. There wasn't like a lot of separate plot threads going on. And in Rings of Power, there are tons of plot threads. There would be whole episodes where they don't even mention a plot thread. You'll be 2 or 3 episodes later that they go back to these characters.
Yeah.
Again, not a problem, but my issue, I love mystery, but I hate if a show spends too much time building up the mystery to have it be, all about this one moment. And then once you see it, like how rewatchable is that?
Sure. Yeah.
So that, the things that were revealed at the end of the show, I didn't feel that were too, or they waited too long to get, like with Halo, season 1 of Halo, like the name of the show is Halo. We never got to a Halo.
Yeah, sure.
So like there's a lot of a buildup that never has paid off yet. The end of the first season, they kind of wrapped up a lot of the initial plot threads. It almost felt like, okay, now we're going to get to the rest of the story.
Sure.
And so I was satisfied by that. I don't love everything about it, but I do enjoy it.
For me, what I like about it is, and I feel the same way about, for me, the same with Star Wars, with Harry Potter, and like the Harry Potter universe and Fantastic Beasts, I think would be one of the closer comparisons. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them they weren't my favorite movies. They were good. They were great. But they weren't my favorite. What I liked about them though, is I got to experience the world again. And that's one thing that I think Rings of Power did well is where we had a finite amount of time in Middle Earth, we got to go back. And I think they did a good job of bringing us back and get to play in it again. And as a consumer, I enjoy being the same reason I love going to Universal and walking down Diagon Alley, because it's getting to be part of that world and getting to experience it again. If you can do that, and I think you nailed it, do it tonally well. That's a big universe to play in, but if you can do it tonally where you're on par with what we had experienced at first, and that first falling in love with the series or first with an IP in general, I think it's a lofty goal, and I think Rings of Power did it justice.
Yeah, I mean that's how it is for The Hobbit with me. Like that right. Isn't exactly as good as The Lord of the Rings. Some people hate it.
Sure,
but I enjoy it for what it is. It's not as good as it could have been, but I will gladly pop it in because I get to go back to Middle Earth. Even the later Pirates of the Caribbean movie, same thing. Love Pirates of the Caribbean. Argument for another day. But I still like just going back and seeing those characters, even though the later films weren't as good as the earlier films.
Yeah.
So. All right. Well, we got to save some stuff for future episodes.
All
we
right.
talk about everything.
Okay. Well, I will keep coming back with my take on 12 Monkeys.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, guys.
Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe if you're not already, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.